Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy, the Pulpwood Queen. And I'm here tonight for our International Pulpwood Queens and Timber Guys Tuesday night book club meeting. We have a very special guest, a fellow Texan down Houston way. We have James Garrison right next to me, and he's going to be talking about his book, What Seems True, a novel. Yay! So we're really, really excited about it. And I really, what I want to do is I want to spend the time talking about you, Jim. So, I've read the book, and I know a lot of you have read the book, and you're all going to want to read the book. But I want to just read for people. This is being recorded. I want to read for people what this is about so people will know. In the back of his book, he's got this wonderful little synopsis. This novel was inspired by a true crime that occurred in Port Arthur, Texas in 1979. A husband and wife, both white, were accused of murdering the first African-American supervisor in the small Texaco refinery where the three worked. The wife confessed that the husband killed the supervisor with whom she had had an affair, but her confession could not be used against the husband so long as the two remained married, and they did. In the end, she was convicted of being an accomplice to the crime. Her conviction was sustained by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals many years later in 1990. There's no record of the husband who pulled the trigger ever being convicted of anything. While this outcome, with the husband going free, seems an injustice that cannot be corrected, what continues to intrigue the author is the psychological aspects of the case, the motives of the people involved, and the nature of the relationships. What Seems True uses a similar fictional murder and situation examine those relationships and motives, which may not be as clear-cut as they seem at first blush. Well, Jim, I'm going to tell you, you have written quite a story, and way before I ever moved to Texas, because I grew up in Kansas and went to California for a while and then moved to Texas, I was big on the Texas true crime books. I mean, Catherine Casey is a dear friend of mine, and, I've read all the Ann Rule, but I remember Blood Will Tell, all these, and they always happen in Houston. I've never wanted to live in Houston because it seems like more murders happen there that make world news. So before you talk about this, let's hear who James Garrison is. Now, I got on your Facebook page today and was snooping around, seeing your family and grandkids and how you like to travel. How in the world did you get to here? I want to hear all about it. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I could say I started writing after the big oil company I worked for paid me to go away in a corporate merger. And I took some time off. June and I traveled. We managed to hit Italy, which we had put off from the previous September in 9/11. And then I sat around, read a lot, and the company actually sponsored helping me find another job. But I don't think I ever sent out a resume. Instead, my son, who is an artist, and you can probably see his
I was just admiring that in the background. It's incredible.
And they told us when he went to Cooper Union that he'd probably never paint anything like that again. They were right. It all changed after that. But he had done a senior video for a senior project, which was a video that he made at Thanksgiving vacation at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
And he asked me, basically, what'd you do in the war, Dad? And he wanted to tape that interview. And I started out and I said, I was kind of ticked off at his sister because she brought her ne'er-do-well boyfriend with her to the beach, which is another story. I could get a novel out of that probably. But so I started out and I said, well, I specialized in brains, sprayed, scrambled, and over easy. And that's probably the bluntest I'd ever been with him. But I told him some stories, and he had heard some of it before. So he used this video. I don't know that it got a particular, he used the video of the shore, the waves coming in the shore, and very quietly and peaceful, and my talking over that. He managed to graduate in any event, but then he suggested, he said, Dad, why don't you write a book? And he gave me a book on how to write your first book.
Oh, that's...
I thought about that, and I said, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And I kind of enjoyed just laying around the house here. I had finally finished reading the unabridged version of War and Peace, and I was into Moby Dick and rereading some other stuff that I had never gotten through. And so I started digging through my memorabilia, which I keep drawers of. And I had letters that I'd sent home about Vietnam. And I had the tape recordings that I had made to send to my mother, my brother, and a girlfriend, actually an on and off girlfriend. So I had those digitized, and so I could listen to those. I had an album. I carried a little brownie camera with me around in my fatigue pants. And everywhere I went while I was on duty, I was a military cop in the Mekong Delta, drafted out of law school. Didn't want to be there. Got there and I found out, this doesn't look like a win-win situation. But I took the photographs and I kept those. I had the what do you call the prints that I turned into negatives. That's right. So I used those. I went back, and the former girlfriend had given me back some of my letters, and so I started researching, and I'll put some more of this maybe in one of my posts. And finally, I, after about 10 drafts, I guess, and sending out queries and all kinds of stuff like that, I wrote another book that's called The Salvation of Buster Adams, which is sci-fi and ended up being 160,000 words, and is about an alien on another planet who uses a small boy in order to observe what's going on Earth. And how it's typical sci-fi type of story. Had a New York agent read that, reject it, comments, and then I did another book called The Safecracker, which was drawn, I drew on my first practice of law in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where I actually had a client who was a safecracker and who I first interviewed on death row in Central Prison in Raleigh, not because he had been convicted of anything at that point, but because he had escaped from the county jail by dropping 3 floors to the ground after sawing his way out of the jail cell and hitting the jailer over the head with the 7-pound iron bar. But anyway, that's another book. And so here comes what seems true. The murder at Port Arthur, it was actually the Port Arthur Asphalt, which is on the ship channel in Port Neches. And I was there when the Texas Ranger came to investigate in 1979, met the Ranger, only time I ever saw him. And but he gave me an inspiration for the character. And then when the shooter went free, who was the husband of the woman with whom the black supervisor had an affair, the DA, the company discharged them both, and the DA, he was still going after the shooter. And the couple, of course, were white. And there were questions of, the racial element. That's Vidor at that point was still a hotbed for the KKK, as I understood it. It was, what do you call it, a sundown town. that a Black person would dare show their face after sundown. And so it's that part of the country. And the union brought a grievance to help get the employees' jobs back. And both Shooter and the wife were out of jail at that time. So I had the tape, and we did the arbitration over the discharge, which the union pursued. Ultimately, as pointed out in the afterward, the wife was convicted of being an accessory. The husband, as far as I could ever determine, was never convicted of anything. And that bothered me. And I wondered, why was there no more evidence? And why wouldn't the wife testify against him? Under Texas law, her confession couldn't be used against him. She could not be compelled to testify against him. And as I actually had someone read an initial draft of the book, and they said that, well, this is just the same old thing. It's, it's a love triangle, and the husband shoots the boyfriend, despite how brutal. And if you read the book, you see he was actually ambushed. And I started thinking, I'm really interested in why the people did what they did, why the co-workers, the union reacted as they did. And I was somewhat interested in why the DA was so bent. I mean, this is 1979, 80 on trying to get the guy. And it's, if I remember correctly, he told me something, I may never be able, and it may have been an assistant DA. He says, I may never be able to convict him, but I'm going to go after him everywhere I can. And so I drafted What Seems True. And in the meantime, I managed to get QL4, the Vietnam book, published due to the help of my good friend, Johnny Bernhard. We exchanged portions of books to read through an ad in the Houston Writers Guild. She read my entire book, the entire Safecracker, which I was just thrilled that she would. And I read a good portion of A Good Girl, and we exchanged comments. Then when the agency accepted her book, it's the same agency that accepted QL4. Johnny went to work for the agency as an agent, called me and said, I'd like to agent the Safecracker. And I said, I want to do QL4 first if we can do that. So she took QL4, helped edit it, and then ushered it through to publisher Touchpoint Press. And then after that, the Buster Adams is still not ready for prime time. The Safecracker was published. QL4 was 2017. The Safecracker came out in September of 20. Gosh, I lose track of time. 2020. What year is this? 2021. And now Touchpoint, well, no, it came out in 2019. What Seems True, Touchpoint accepted that, and then we published that September 2021. See what happens when you begin to lose these time frames?
Well, I think COVID has a lot to do with that too. Yeah.
I said, every day is a Saturday. Yeah, I always dreaded Sunday afternoons because I could be flying out to somewhere or, thinking about work. Saturday mornings, sometimes I work, but Saturday afternoons, I could knock back, relax. And June and I always had a nice meal. We put the kids aside somewhere, kept them busy, and we still do the candlelight dinners with a reasonably priced bottle of wine every night we can.
All right. Well, that's a great story. But man, when your son told you to write a book, you took it very seriously. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 books. I mean, you hit it pretty hard. So
well, I actually bought 4 spiral notebooks and decided, well, I want to write 4 novels before my mind fades away. And all of them are full.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, you know, some of my favorite authors didn't even get started till they were 70. So, you know, nowadays you can't, you know, everybody goes, oh, I'm not going to have enough time. It's amazing to me how many people get their start in life after they've retired. So keep writing. But this story, you know, growing up in Kansas, I was talking to everybody kind of before we went on air. My father was in the drilling oil business, started out as a roughneck and worked his way up to the ranks till he owned a company. And so I know what it's like and how those guys talk. And so when I read your book, I thought, wow, I haven't read a book in a long time that has this much cussing in it. And this is just like home. Because, you know, when you go out on those rig sites, I'm sorry, but it gets a little rough. And it seemed the conversations that you had seemed very authentic to me. And also, I'm kind of like you. When somebody does something, everybody always says they're a criminal. I want to know why they did it. I mean, I still can't get, you know, I lay awake at night thinking about those two brothers during the Boston Marathon that did what they did, and how there was a big manhunt through Boston to find them. And it's just, and they were young. And I thought, I've never heard anything about those boys since then. It's like they killed. What happened to those boys? Why would somebody do something as horrendous as that? I want to know that story. So I'm glad you wrote this book, What Seems True. Now, I know you did a lot of research, a lot. I saw your newspaper, you know, articles that you had laid out and everything. And do you think it was covered well, the trial and everything, the trials and with the news? Because I always question everything that's in the newspaper anymore, because I can't tell you how many times they get things completely wrong about me when I'm interviewed. How do you feel about that?
I think that the local paper, I think it was the Port Arthur News and the Beaumont paper, covered it relatively well. I do not have any clippings that I kept from that, which is fairly unusual. I have a drawer full of clippings, and I have a lot of things. I kept all of my legal briefs, and I actually kept the arbitration brief and the arbitration award from the case. And then the research, I found the Court of Appeals decision from 1990, which rather surprised me that it took that long. And my recollection is that the judge at first tossed the confession, as I do in the book. Certainly, the wife was not in jail at the time we had the arbitration, maybe a year or two later. And by that time, everything, I think, had just faded away. And I called one of the lawyers I worked with during the period where we were going through strike violence, and there were other issues that arose out of the labor negotiations. Called him in Beaumont and asked him what he knew about the case. He didn't even remember the case. Yeah, I did not try to research it beyond I did a records check and found out that the couple apparently moved to near Dallas and bought a new house there and lived happily ever after.
And you don't know what they're doing today?
Nope. Hopefully not looking for me.
That's true.
Occur to me.
Do you think if this happened today, would it be a different story?
Well, the law's still the same.
Yes.
And if the people were the same, she will protect him no matter how many men he kills. And that would be the evidence. The only other evidence they had was a shotgun shell, spent shell, that evidently they couldn't get a match with. And even if they could get a match, there would, for the gun they found, it would probably not hold up as adequate to show, prove the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. So maybe there could be some DNA evidence. I don't know.
You know, when I was a kid, I always thought, you know, if you broke the law, you would eventually get caught and pay for it. Then I became an adult and I found out not necessarily so. If you have the money and you can hire racehorse, you know, what was his name? Haynes?
Horse Haynes.
Yes, if you could hire somebody like him, you know, you can get off. And it's always been fascinating to me. And, you know, Catherine Casey is always coming up with showing stories that are happening across the lot in Texas, and she writes about a female perspective of a Texas Ranger and a fictional series and true crime. She was real good friends with Ann Rule and Diane Fanning and all these people that write true crime. But I think that is something that you want to do another book on, or what are you thinking about for the future?
Well, I actually have another a collection of short stories and poems accepted by Touchpoint that I hope will come out.
Oh, well, good.
And it's actually stories and essays one goes all the way back to Vietnam, which I turned it into creative nonfiction. An incident I observed while I was on night watch. For the novel, I'd really like to do a Civil War novel based on some of my family history. My great-grandmother, who I believe was a school teacher, according to the family lore, actually took a horse and buggy or a mule and wagon from Iredell County, North Carolina, to the Fredericksburg battlefield, or where the hospital was, where her husband, my great-grandfather, was hospitalized after the Battle of Fredericksburg with his kneecap shot off. So I think that would be a great story to write about that journey. I have the characters. Just to me, for those of you who do historical fiction, doing the research to get everything right about, you know, the clothing, the roads, and I read Cold Mountain with some interest because it's with I think it was a deserter from the army to go back to his book. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just don't know that I have the ability and patience to do that kind of in-depth research. I've got a bunch of Civil War books back here, including some contemporary, at least one contemporary one.
Well, you can always write it from a perspective of your family history, and then, you know, that's a story, whatever. And then whatever comes along. You ought to read Robert Hicks, because he just recently passed away, one of my good friends, and he helped restore the battlefield in Franklin, Tennessee, and was voted Tennessean of the Year for his philanthropy for that endeavor. But his books he was a master storyteller, and they're more based upon the story than, you know, he's got a lot of the, you know, research too, but the story of the Carnington plantation and the woman who, so many boys were murdered at that battle in just a few relatively minutes, 20 minutes, that they were shot, and they would put them on the table in the second story, and they were sawing off their arms and legs because they couldn't repair them, and throwing them out the window. And the arms and legs got as high as the second story. And they did a mass burial grave of putting all the bodies in there. Then the woman who owned the plantation couldn't sleep. So she had them all exhumed and she had them individually reburied with the proper. It's the most fascinating story I've ever heard in my life. And when Robert gave me a tour of the plantation, the blood stains are still on the floor in that room. They can't get them out. It's gruesome. I mean, we remember the story of, Gone with the Wind, that horrible battle scene but yeah, I think everybody, you never can have too many Civil War books because there's so many people that are so fascinated with that aspect of American history. So go for it. I mean, why not? It sounds like an interesting story. I want to know too, I'm sure all the authors here want to know your process. That 4 books in a relatively short period of time. So are you writing every day? Do you have a schedule? How do you work? No.
When the muse visits me, I write, and I often just make notes on paper, on the long sticky notes that I can use, stick them someplace. And when it was not a relatively, maybe it was a relatively short period. To me, it was a long time, starting in 2002 until the first book was published in 2017. But in that process, I wrote thousands of words. In fact, if I guess lawyers are good at that, we can just spout, stuff. It may not make sense, but my big problem is making the books shorter. The 160,000 word sci-fi book had an appendix, and I can't imagine I'm going to get a publisher interested in that unless I split it into 2 books. When I started writing, as I said, I bought the notebooks. I have a new notebook for the Civil War novel. And I divided it into sections. I had themes. Why am I writing this?
Yeah.
What's it about? And I think one of my posts, I'll talk about the themes I came up with for Vietnam, because I really probably dug more into that on the research than the others. And characters, I would develop my characters. I'd develop a timeline. I use diagrams. I think I saw something, read something. And I read a lot of books about writing other than the one that my son gave me. I went to writers' conferences, Pikes Peak, Houston Writers Guild, Writers League of Texas, and listened to other people talk about writing. But I'm sure those ideas of diagramming and laying out what you're going to do came from those training. But when I wrote, I'd write in the morning, and I would use long legal sheets, and I would write everything out longhand. And I kept QL4. Some of the others I threw out, but I must have a stack of legal sheets that high. Reread it, may rewrite, and then I might outline where I'm going with this. I think I had an idea of how it was going to end, although when I typed the books up, and June refuses to type anything like that for me now, although when it comes to the editing process and I have to give the publisher my corrections to the final manuscript, she does help with that. But I type up a draft, go over it, type up another draft. Probably before I give this to anybody outside my family, it's a 3rd draft. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy working on the computer. It's gotten a little harder now. My cataract surgery didn't turn out all that great for looking at lights. To me, the editing process is enjoyable. I might wake up in the middle of the night and think, well, that character, that doesn't work. And I do that up to the point that my Touchpoint editor has the book, and I've even sent corrections at the point it was ready to go to print. Not major ones, but things that I'd wake up and think, that doesn't make sense. I need to fill in a gap here. And I would do that. I was not a trial lawyer, but in the when I started practice and to the 80s, I did some trial work, but mostly I enjoyed the appellate work, and I would do that with legal briefs. And I always had, when we did legal writing with my group up until I retired, any significant document had to be reviewed by another lawyer. And if you saw my post this morning, you saw I kept these, language word usage books, and I had my old college Harbrace handbook, which I read all the way through before I started writing Long and Strunk and White. And the going through and catching the glitches to me is fun. I enjoy doing that. It's called nitpicking, I think. So I don't know, did I answer your question? I always told my witnesses, always answer the question.
Yeah. So, well, how did you get all this language? How'd you get all the conversations? I mean, I haven't seen you talk this way. Where did you, is it something that you heard, or what, because there's a lot of words in here that when I first, now I'm reading aloud all the books before, parts of them each month to kind of give a tease out there for everybody. And the first time I read your book, I go, I think I better cut it a little short. I don't really want to say that word. So, and I've caught myself several times where I've done read alouds and I get in a very uncomfortable place. To Kill a Mockingbird, I did a read aloud of that entire book, and that was difficult, to say the least. But where did you get, I know I couldn't even put shit in my book, and I got grief from my publisher, which was Grand Central Publishing, because they said it will not fit the Christian market. And I go, well, you don't think Christians say the word shit? I said, being a Sunday school teacher, and it wasn't something I said, I was repeating verbatim what somebody had said in a conversation, and I got it in there. But you have to fight your battles. But I think, man, you've got a lot of language in there. How did that get through? I mean, did you have anybody try to censor you on any of this?
The only place I was, the nearest I came being censored was that Dan Esperson, in What Seems True, is very observant of women and how they dress and how their appearance, how they walk, little quirks. I mean, who has an ankle bracelet and that sort of thing. And one of the editors said, well, you're focusing too much on appearance and of the women. So yeah, because this guy is, maybe he's not obsessive, but he's observant. June would probably tell you that in our years together, I will comment upon dress, jewelry, and I even read the New York Times fashion section.
That's great.
And did research on pumps and slingbacks or whatever they are. And
right.
So what I did is I thought, the editor is right. I need to talk more about how the men dress, three-piece suits, the hairstyles. And so I did that for balance. But the language, I really haven't. QL4 now, which is military.
Yeah.
I got, publisher, not a problem, but a reviewer for the Military Writers Society questioned, why there had to be all the bad language. Well, and actually the pushback came from my grandson. He says, "Granddad, why do you have all the F words in QL4?" I said,
how they talked.
That's the way we talk. And
that's right.
we were all pissed off when we were there. And when you're angry, you use a lot of bad language.
When I went back to college, I couldn't, it was F this, F that, F that. And then after a while, I didn't hear it anymore, but at first it was real shocking. But the kids, they just saw me as one of them. And it was really hard for me to hear it at first. And then after a while, I thought, it's just a word, they're not, it's just a word, and I got used to it. But there's still a few words that are very uncomfortable. But my grandfather was the old cowboy, and he cussed up a mean streak, and I get mad, I'm going to say it. So, but I was just curious how you got that all by, because I remember I couldn't hardly get anything to go in my book, because they were working very hard on trying to get me in the Christian market. And I wanted to say, well, I don't know what world you live in, but today the world is a lot different than it used to be. People are a little bit more, and especially if you want to appeal to younger people, you can't. It's like Dean Geist one time said, she goes, when the girl bumped out of the wagon and fell on her rear end from getting thrown, she didn't go, oh my goodness gracious, I have hurt my bum. She said she cussed up, but she wrote for the Christian market, so she had to make up some. That
Kathy,
was a cat. Mm-hmm.
During my work career, the language was very clean in a corporate environment.
Yeah.
And it really didn't come up until you got into the refineries. But I want to be honest in my writing.
Yeah.
And to be honest, you have to reflect how people talk and, what I hear on the street. All of us, we listen to.
Oh, I do.
Rain. Yes. The fun thing is listening to the young woman on her cell phone on the Stairmaster next to me. And, and that time-wise, you can't ignore 1960, 70, 80, that was the way people talked. That was the language.
Right.
They would not talk that way now in many cases.
Right.
In some cases, they would.
Yeah. Jim, I'm going to put it back on a galley view, and let's get everybody here. If you have a question, just go to reactions and raise your hand. I don't know who was first. Let's go ladies first. Sarah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, it relates to the language. I will have to say, I really enjoy the refinery setting. I come from family. My dad was a machinist at the Mobil Oil and BP refinery near here in Fernhill, Washington, total different part of the country. But so I was raised with that and the salty language. Well, he was ex-Navy too. So, it's right on. And I actually worked a couple shutdowns at the local refinery myself during my checkered career. And I was out in the field climbing around on those scaffoldings, checking weldings and, making sure everything was the way it was supposed to be for the shutdown. Mm-hmm. And those guys did not spare the language around me, but they gave me a compliment. They said, that little gal knows more what she's doing than some of them other fellas. So I just wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed the setting and seeing it from the other side. I was in labor and you're on the legal end, and just what went on in that arbitration, my God. So thank you, it was a fascinating book.
Thanks.
Jeffrey had his hand up next, go ahead.
I've got to unmute, and oddly enough, I come from a oil company background too. My dad worked for Texaco.
Oh yeah.
But he worked in the UK, and he worked at the Milford Haven refinery, where he used to tell stories about it. One of them I remember was that they had a catalytic cracker. I don't know what that does. It breaks up the oil somehow, and it would explode. And the stuff was like snow. It was whatever the material was, the catalytic material was like snow, and it would snow on the houses in town. And Texaco would have to clean this stuff up whenever that happened. And I was always fascinated with stuff that went on with companies like that affected people that you never heard of. It wasn't like the oil, it was on fire and a dozen people were killed. It was just these weird things that would happen. So your story, Jim, really tapped a vein for me. And I think it's a great inside look at what goes on that most people don't ever see.
Right.
So I just wanted to thank you for that, and for describing that world so well. And I actually had two questions. One is, which characters, if any, did you make up out of whole cloth? And why did you feel you had to make them up? And then what aspects of the story did you leave out? Were there aspects that you left out? And how did you decide what not to write about, if anything?
The characters, of course, are all my creation in terms of what I recalled people. And there were certain aspects of them that I wanted to use, like the plant manager with the swagger stick and his George C. Scott. He was a former tank commander. I particularly like doing him. The Linton, the assistant plant manager, I never came across anybody who was that blatantly racist. Okay. And I wanted him to be like the foil, and the plant manager is the brother of the deceased
George.
And I played around with the names. I kind of have fun doing that. But he was, I never came across anyone like him. But in terms of my career and seeing how African Americans have, and women, have hopefully managed to move into the workplace. He was an early example where he is basically being groomed. He's being adopted by the plant manager after Billy Graham dies. And I don't know if you recall in the book, Dan Esperson, who is a total creation. I was a young guy. Dan is jaded, middle-aged, and I was, maybe in my career, I got to the point I was like that, but not in that refinery setting. But Dan is thinking about, I think his name, I used him George, is that this guy has too many demands placed upon him and he's being set up to fail. And the other one that is a creation is Liz Johnson, who's another one of my favorites. She is the industrial relations manager for the Southeast, the Texas Gulf Coast. Huge operation. The guy who actually had that job during this period was a cranky old Irishman that was short and just mean and tough, but very sharp. I wanted to put Liz Johnson in that. She's probably an amalgam of a bunch of women managers I've come across in the years that I work there. And she's being set up to fail. Yeah. Most women at that time would not be put in a line she like that. Yeah. She would have been put in public relations, which is where she. In fact, it's funny. Probably the most profane boss I ever had was a woman who worked for Saudi Aramco in Saudi Arabia, had her own Mercedes, which she drove around the compound, and a Saluki. And she was one tough lady.
With the mouth. Oh,
yes. The other question was, what did I leave out?
But, yeah, were there any aspects of the criminal story that you left out?
What in fact happened, I think I don't know if the woman actually served any time, but her conviction was upheld as being an accessory, and she got 10 years and a $5,000 fine. Okay. That's where I did research and never could find out whether she served any time.
Oh. Well, I'll buy your Civil War story. I love them.
I do too. Great. We'll look forward to it. Okay. June, did you have a question?
No, not really a question. I just wanted to, Jim didn't mention when you were talking about the language. Jim, you ought to tell them a little bit about your background.
I adapt my vocabulary and my accent to the setting. I grew up in Piedmont, North Carolina. My mother had never admitted to more than a first grade education. And I remember when she was a big fan of the impeachment hearings for Richard. And she'd always talk about they're going to impeach him. And she dropped, beginnings and endings of words. And so I had that, if I get with my brother, is we would lapse into that Southern Piedmont accent. So I knew the language, and then I ended up going to Duke, which is essentially a heavily Yankee-fied school, and I married a Yankee. And my vocabulary kind of changed a little bit. So I lapse back and forth. I can do accents. And I think I'd said in one of my posts, I really empathize more with the people who are not the managers, who are not the wealthy people, who were bringing the suits, which may have actually helped me be a better lawyer because I understood where they were coming from.
Very good. Okay, anybody else have a comment or want to make have a question? Oh, fantastic. Well, Jim, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, well, if nobody else has anything, I'm wondering how you decided to have Ben be so susceptible to the women, and especially, the femme fatale. I kept going, he's smart. He can't be this.
Oh, I love you.
About her, So what made you decide to go that way?
Love it. Actually, one of my readers is a former lawyer I worked with. She moved to New York and she read the book and she said, well, it's a quick read, but how could a smart guy like Dan fall for a refinery secretary? Oh, come on, Susie. And I started to say, Bill Clinton. And but I instead used a little more graphic expression that, some men don't really think with their minds. In certain situations, they think with other parts of their body. So.
But she's so manipulative. I just kept going, but I'm a woman and I can see it, And I guess for men, if this woman's coming on to him that strongly, he just loses his head, loses both heads.
He wants to believe. He fools himself, and it's only until the confession that he sees that. Well, her defense was that Zach made me do it. He said it was either him or me. But then in the confession, she says, well, Zach said we need to clear the air before we move into our new house. And the way they clear the air is she lures the supervisor, who's also susceptible, to a place behind a drive-in theater. Now, the supervisor in the book and in real life, evidently there had been an affair going on in the spring. And then he tries to resume it by, with a box of candy and flowers and a note in the back of her car, which the keys are left in the cars are unlocked in the refinery in case there's an explosion that they can get them out of there. And the husband finds it.
Mm.
So she's hopefully across in the book, she comes across pretty well. I just read a review of Basic Instinct. You remember the?
Yeah, I remember.
Sharon Stone,
yes,
and Michael Douglas. And the thought occurred to me, maybe it's been years. I saw the movie and didn't make a big impression, frankly. But maybe I was in my main character. I'm channeling her. But no, I don't think so. Sheila is more subtle and not a hard person.
Think Body Heat.
Body Heat. Oh, I love that movie.
I did too. That was so shocking. Yeah. Well, this has been fascinating, Jim. So how far are you into this next book?
Well, the Ruminations, the collection is done. The Civil War book, I haven't scratched the surface really.
Okay. Well, I just happen to be a short story lover and poetry too. So I'm looking forward to it. And I also wanted to mention one other thing. When authors send me the book, you'd be surprised how many people don't even put a note. But Jim did. And I just love your little note. And I know this sounds crazy, but handwritten notes impress me. You can type up something and this book is about, and it's the next thing to Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, blah, blah, blah. But my favorite note of all time was from a Chicago author. His name is Jim Cokeris. And he put, "If you read my book, I'll love you forever. Love, Jim." And I thought, damn, that's the best thing I've ever heard. And I love that book and I made it a selection. But you don't have to tell us what the book's about. We can read it, and I really just want to know who the person is. So I appreciate you sharing all your backstory with us. I really enjoy that we have a week of you blogging with us. And he's worked really hard on these blogs, you guys, so I really want everybody to go on board and check them every day. The Pulpit Queen presents her picks. That's our blog page. You cannot post on the blog page if you're not the featured author. You post on the official Pulpit Queens and Timber Guys page. A lot of people just try so hard to get on that Pulpit Queen blog page, and sometimes they sneak in because we're in a hurry. But please post on our book club page, not on the blog page, because that features on Jim. And this is your week, Jim, and we're excited about it. And I really did love your cover too. They did a really nice job with the book, and I look forward to your short story collection. Huh?
My son did that.
Your son? Well, wow, he's very talented, and I love the picture in the back. Too, I love the stories about how the family dynamics work too. Did your kids, grown kids, and your wife, they all read your book, right?
Oh, my daughter wouldn't read anything.
Really?
my son, well, she read the first chapter of QL4 and she ripped it up. And, but that was return. I ripped up her first writing in law school too, 2 hours on the phone. But Jeff, he reads it, and his 9-year-old grandson has read some of it too.
Oh my goodness!
My grandson.
Yeah, well, they're adorable. I've been looking.
Oh, and June reads everything.
Yeah. Do I see a couple hands up?
I don't see any hands up. Oh! I'm sorry, Eileen. Go ahead. Eileen?
I did the wrong thing. Am I on? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Jim, I haven't had the pleasure of reading your book yet, but I look forward to it. I'm enjoying your discussions on the blog and tonight. So I'm curious, this is a kind of a true crime story, I guess, that I'm getting a sense of. And there's people, the people that actually committed this crime are still alive. Is that true?
Yep.
And
No.
And no one had, did you have to go and get any, check out and anything that I guess if it's public, you can write about it. Did you have to get any permission for writing?
No, these were public figures. And I make clear this is a fictionalized version. Yeah, I don't use their names, and I really don't care what they think about it.
Oh, I wouldn't care either. I'm just make sure they don't come after you. That's all. That would be the worry. And it fascinated me that you actually handwrite first. I can't. I used to do that, but I've gotten so connected to the laptop and I type very quickly. So I feel like writing it and then having to type it again. I give you a lot of credit for that.
Well, it changes quite a bit when I type it.
So you get your ideas down in the handwritten part, and then you edit as you're rewriting it. Is that how it's working?
Yeah, I write most of it out though, and I may outline some, and there may be gaps where I just fill in and I type it. But once I type it, unless I make notes and I want to plug something in, I do the editing all on the computer. I don't print a version and try to edit that.
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah. Well, I look forward to reading the book, and good luck to you. Congratulations.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your book, Freedom Lessons. I thought it really struck a chord with me growing up in North Carolina, and seeing, becoming aware of the racism and the difficulty of integration at that point.
Yes, and I saw that theme is similar in your book, that you deal with the racism. And I think it's important for people, as it's been said already, to hear what life was really like during certain times that we didn't live in certain parts of the country. And we can learn from, hopefully, from past mistakes and see what we can do better. So I look forward to reading your version of that time and those challenges. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, there. But unmute for a second. Jim, you know how much I love your books. And, I'm a Carolina daughter, so I love your voice too. It comes through loud and clear, but the Texas part comes through too. And I just wanted to comment that Sheila, because of her name, Sheila, being symbolic for the Aussie term for lady, yes. Right?
Yes.
I felt like it was a really combination, like a hybrid between a noir and a Southern, almost Gothic. It had Gothic elements, your story. And I just felt like when I was reading Sheila, I was seeing a femme fatale and say a Humphrey Bogart movie. So I just wanted to say that because I think that's why she was believable to me. As believable as somebody in a noir movie, right? Yeah. Thanks a lot. Really.
Thank you, Kathy. I have enjoyed your book, and also I appreciate the interview we had.
Yeah, it was my own.
You mentioned one reference. I don't know if you've folks here have read Brighton Rock by Graham Greene.
Oh.
Graham Greene is, I've read much of his work, Quiet American for the Vietnam novel. But at Brighton Rock, there's a evil character, Pinky, in the candy, Brighton Rock. No matter where you cut it, it's the same. And the thing, I read it in college, and it really, to me, was a gripping book. I reread it before I wrote What Seems True. So I had that in mind. No matter where you break Sheila, she's the same.
Wow, that's interesting.
Cool.
You know, Jim, one of my favorite authors and one of my best friends in the whole wide world comes from that Port Arthur, Beaumont area. He's a writer. His name is Christopher Cook. And I think you would enjoy meeting each other. He lives in Prague right now. He's been there for
Yes.
quite some time, but he's wrote a book called Robbers about two Texas boys that go on a grift. It's quite a read. It's kind of like your book. So, but I just want to introduce you to him because he's from down that way. And he's coming back to Texas soon. I'll have to let you know when he's in this part of the country. Maybe you guys could have coffee. He's a really interesting guy. So anybody else have any comments? All right. Well, thank you, James.
Before you go, I want to thank you for having me on the program and for creating this fabulous book club that's so welcoming and nurturing of authors. You know, both us with small presses and those who do great things. So thank you, and thank Mandy for her just dynamic promotion of what we're doing while she's trying to write.
Well, Mandy's gone back to work at the bookstore because this volunteer work doesn't pay very well. So you guys, she probably couldn't be here tonight. She may be working, but if you could do one thing for Mandy, you could order her new book, Oliver, and you could also take out an ad in Reading Nation magazine. We're hoping to, it's kind of starting to slow back down on authors taking out advertisements. And believe me, her prices are so reasonable and she works so hard at it. So if you could help Mandy out, that would be really great because she's a hard worker, man. She keeps me going every single day. So, and follow Robert. I'm looking forward when you come back for my book and film club. It's kind of lonesome by myself, Robert, but I did Moonrise Kingdom last Saturday and I had a good time just talking about it. So if you lose Zooms or whatever, go to the calendar of events on our website, www.thepulpwoodqueens.com. I'm updating it all the time. And if you can't find something, email me at the Pulpwood Queen, pulpwoodqueen@gmail.com, and I will help you as best I can. So thank you all for supporting me. Thank you for turning out for James, and we'll get everybody back to turn out for you all. So share the news, get more people on board because we are a book club that's about community. And if we can't share each other's lives, there's no point in living as far as I'm concerned. I love that we're all sharing our stories and the authors are in conversation with us. So thank you for being here. Thank you, James. Thank you to your wife, June. And please go to his blog tomorrow. He's got great stories and great pictures and nice videos. So onward and upward. It's all about the story. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.